We're at Horrobles in Berwyn, Illinois on Roosevelt Road. Be careful, our GPS took us to an empty lot on Cermak. We're here with filmmaker, author, and dinosaur expert Don Glut. How you doing today, Don?
I'm doing fine, Count. Good seeing you again.
Good seeing you again. And we're here, I see you have a big assortment of all your DVDs, but we're here to talk about your latest book,
Okay.
and that would be
Shock Theater Chicago style. Just like the pizza, Chicago style.
There you go.
That's where the
okay.
title came from.
Well, what can you tell us about Shock Theater Chicago style? Is it thicker, thinner, thin crust, if we're going to do the pizza analogy?
It's stuffed. It's stuffed with lots of information. It's probably more information than you'll ever want to know about Shock Theater. Given the fact that it was a local show, local Chicago TV show that only lasted just a little bit under 2 years, but when it was on, it was like the most popular show in the city, and people religiously watched it. They had Shockdale parties. People like myself would dress like Marvin with the turtleneck shirt and the glasses, and it was a good show. I mean, to me, it was one of the best, if not the best, shock theater type of show or creature feature type of show that I've ever seen personally.
Well, that would be, his contemporaries would be Roland Zachary and the Vampira characters,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit before him, but certainly in that era.
Vampira preceded him, and Vampira preceded Zachary. Marvin came in a little bit after Zachary. I think there might have been one or two in between, and that was when the shock package of Universal horror films were first released to television. That was 1957, and they were bought by local TV stations all over the country. And I don't know where the idea first came up to do a horror, who came up with the idea, but one station would influence another, and sooner or later the entire country was filled with these local horror host characters, and they've still influenced people. They're still going on. I think I'm standing next to one right here.
Right. And what can you tell us, first off, how did the name Marvin come about? That certainly seems unghoulish.
I don't know. Marvin was basically a sinister, sadistic, ghoulish beatnik type character. And Marvin was that kind of name like Marvin, Melvin was kind of sometimes associated with nerdy type characters. Marvin to me wasn't nerdy, he was cool.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of one of those names that are looked at by some people as sounding funny. Herman Munster, Herman was considered a funny name. So Herman, Marvin, Melvin, that sort of thing. I guess it was probably just some name he picked out of the air, out of a group of names. That's just my guess.
And what station was WBKB? I mean, that sounds like the BKT killer. That doesn't stand for bind, kill, something.
WBKB was the local channel 7, which is now WLS TV. And I don't know if that's considered a superstation, what it is today, but WBKB was that we had a number of local channels in Chicago that were all very popular. There was WGN, which is now a big cable channel. There was I forgot what the others were, but WBKB was like one of the big ones.
And with the Creature Theater package, why did Marvin only last 2 years if he was so popular?
Well, I think for one thing they started running out of movies. I read one review where they said, "Oh, they're running The Mummy's Tomb again. This is like the 4th time around." And after a while the other shock theater shows tended to run just the 52 movies that were in that original package, Marvin started to fill it out by running things like Son of Kong and the RKO films like I Walked with a Zombie and some of the Columbia's Return of the Vampire. So he stretched out a little bit more, but I think people just kind of got tired of it, and I think WBKB got offered more money to put on the Cuban baseball show, which they did, and then boxing than they were getting for putting on the Shock Theater show. And also, Shock Theater show was a big production. They had all kinds of other characters and props and on-set special effects and makeups and things to deal with, where they could do something else cheaper and make more money out of it.
And Marvin, of course, was played by Terry Bennet, and his wife played an off-camera character. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Terry Bennet played Marvin, and his wife was actually the second Deer, a character called Deer. Sometimes she was called her or she, but most of the time Deer. And she was, you never saw her face. For beginning, you would just see her from the back. Then later on, she wore a mask that you still hid her face. She's a beautiful woman, a beautiful, shapely blonde. And every station break, Marvin would torment her, or even murder her in some way, cut off her head, shoot her with a gun, poison or whatever. And then, of course, the next station break, she was all back, complete, healed, like nothing had happened. Towards the end of the series, when she evolved a little bit more, she actually turned the tables on him a number of times. So.
Okay. And you also have a foreword in your book by Kerry Bennet, who is the son of Terry Bennet. What can you tell us about Kerry?
Well, Kerry, it's funny. I got an email from him because I'd written an article, a letter that was published in either Film Facts or Scary Monsters magazine, both published on this neck of the woods. And I had some inaccuracies about my memories of the show. Some things I'd picked up hearsay. So Kerry somehow tracked me down and wanted to set the record straight. So Kerry and I developed this email correspondence. His mother was still alive, Joy Bennett, and it turned out that he'd never heard of it. His parents never talked about shock theater while his dad was still alive. His dad died when Kerry was 10, and one day he went up in the attic and he found all these boxes filled with scripts and newspaper clippings and photos from shock theater. He said, "What's this?" And he got very intrigued. He became like a fan of his parents' show long after it was canceled and after his father had passed away. And I knew a lot about the show. I'd watched almost every episode of it. I had vivid memories of it. So we started corresponding, and then that eventually led to a book. And then I decided to do the book. And the book was fun for me because it was my way of helping a guy who really didn't know his father that well discover this whole aspect of his dad. And so to me, it was very rewarding for that reason alone.
Well, that must have been a very interesting find, and certainly better than finding an intimate tape of your parents or something like that.
Yeah. And it was also Kerry now, he knows what the show was like. He knows what was going on between his parents and the management of WBKB. None of the stuff he'd ever known before. And I don't know how big of an audience this book is going to have because, first of all, the target audience is probably in the store right now. People, and then you got to, if it's going to be a nostalgia thing, who's alive that remembers the show? Who did the show make an impression on, like it made on me? So my goal was to make a book that, for somebody who remembered the show, it would be a trip down memory lane. But for somebody who'd never even heard of the show, it would be something they would be discovering for the first time and still make it entertaining and informative.
And you also have an afterword by Dick Dyszel, Count Gore Duvall, who was actually in the store just a little bit ago.
Yes, Count Gore wrote the afterword because he was influenced by Marvin, and that's what's one of the things that inspired him to do his Count Gore Duvall show. And then I'm not sure if we mentioned, but Kerry wrote the introduction, so it's bookended. Kerry wrote the introduction, and then Dick wrote the outro. And when you see the photo of Kerry, he looks very much like his dad. He's bigger, a little stockier, but he looks very much like his dad. And I have a photo of him holding a big portrait that was used as a prop on the show of his father, as Marvin, and also holding the glasses that he wore.
Does he have any intention of reviving the character?
I may have asked him that once, and I can't remember what he said. I don't think he's really interested in performing, though.
Okay.
He's more of, I guess, a fan than an actor. But he could do it. He probably. I mean, he certainly has a look.
Well, yeah, and then just a historical perspective. Sammy Terry Jr. in Indianapolis has gone out as his father character, Sammy Terry. So.
He could call it Son of Marvin.
There
or
you go.
Like that.
There you go. Son of Marvin. There you go. Well, Don, what else are you working on these days?
Well, I just finished a novel a couple of weeks ago, which is the 12th in a series of Frankenstein novels I started many decades ago. But I wrote one more. It's called Frankenstein: The Final Horror, and I'm not sure when it'll be out, but it's done. And I'm supposed to next month direct a low-budget horror film for a friend of mine who has a company called Cinema Epoch, and it's going to be kind of a Val Lewton-ish cat girl, were-cat kind of thing. And that'll be fun.
Great. And any more, you've also written some adaptations of Star Wars?
I wrote the novelization of Empire Strikes Back, and that was a long time ago, though. And, yeah, and the only other adaptation I wrote, I was hired to write a Big Little book of Clash of the Titans, and then MGM pulled it at the last minute because they didn't want Big Little book sold for something like 39 cents, and they didn't want their big budget movie associated with something that cost 39 cents. So even though it was written, it never came out.
And what do you mean by a big little book?
Big Little Book were throwbacks to the 1930s, and they were books about this big, about this thick, hard covers, and each page on the left side was a picture, and text would be on the right. And they did them on all kinds of, everything from Mickey Mouse to Tarzan to Gene Autry. I mean, just everything imaginable they did a Big Little Book on.
Great. And Don, if people want to pick up a copy of Shock Theater Chicago Style?
Well, if you're in the Chicago area, come to Horrobles in Berwyn on Roosevelt.
On Roosevelt, yes.
6721 Roosevelt, is that the address?
6729, right?
It's,
There you go, 6729
you can't miss
Roosevelt.
it. You can't miss it. Right across from the bank. And you can also get it on Amazon.com.
Great. And it's published by McFarland.
McFarland and Company.
Yeah,
correct.
and it's McFarlandPub.com, I believe.
Yes. I'm not sure what the email. I'll take your word for that.
Yeah, I think it is. And anything else you're working on you want to say?
I lose track. I've got so many projects going on. I'm working on I'm putting together a new website called Don Glut's Dinosaurs. If you have a lot of time on your hands, check it out because it's enormous. It's gigantic. And I've been doing some voiceover acting too, dubbing Japanese movies into English. So I'm busy. It's always keeping me busy.
Great. And you're based out of California these days, correct?
Yes, Burbank, California.
Great. And if people want to look up your entertainment company, that website is?
We've got two websites. One is just me, DonaldFGlut.com, my name.com, and then FrontlineFilms.com. They'll show you some of the movies we've done.
Great, Don. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm sure to appreciate it. Thank
you
you.
too. Thank you. This is Don Glut, and you are watching Count Midnight.